He claimed that his films were awful and referred to him as an actor's nemesis. Robert Duvall rejected millions of dollars to avoid this Hollywood titan because he hated him so much. Even John Wayne had to intervene to end their acrimonious fight since it had gotten that severe. Duvall's response to the question of whether he would work with him again was harsh. "Never. If I never do, it doesn't matter to me." You'll be stunned to learn who Duvall's most despised co-star is. On January 5, 1931, Robert Duvall was born in San Diego, California. His family had a long history in the arts and the military. Mildred, his mother, was an avid actor who frequently appeared in local theater productions. Duvall's relationship to Confederate General Robert E. Lee on her side would eventually influence one of his most prominent movie roles. William, his father, was a well-respected Navy officer. At the age of 39, he was promoted to captain. Being raised in a military household required discipline and organization. The Duvalls frequently relocated, residing on naval installations in Virginia, Maryland, and Rhode Island. Robert spent the majority of his early years in Annapolis. Robert didn't want to join the Navy, despite his father's wishes for him to do so. He then claimed that his only academic strength was acting. His love of performing began at a young age. At the Principia in Missouri, after first at the Severn School in Maryland. He pursued that desire after high school, attending Principia College in Illinois to study play. He earned a degree in drama in 1953, but before he could begin performing professionally, life had other intentions. He enlisted in the Army that same year. Shortly after the end of the Korean War, he served for around a year and was assigned to Georgia's Camp Gordon. He did not follow in his father's footsteps in the military. He was only promoted to private first class, and he frequently made fun of his lack of military prowess. Nevertheless, a significant event occurred during that period. He participated in a play at the local theater. His brief appearance in the play room service served as a reminder of his true calling. He made a significant move in 1955. After packing, he traveled to New York City. Should take the neighborhood playhouse school of the theater's acting classes seriously. The Sanford Meisner approach, which emphasized being organic and emotionally genuine on stage, was taught at the institution. He wasn't by himself. James Caan, Gene Hackman, and Dustin Hoffman were among his classmates. All of them were young, impoverished, and resolute. New York was not an easy place to live. To make ends meet, Duvall grabbed any work he could find. He drove trucks, worked in retail, and sorted mail. Although they didn't require acting, these professions provided him a better understanding of regular people, which he later used to give his characters greater nuance. Hoffman and Hackman shared modest flats with him, and they frequently alternated sleeping on a couch that folded out. Despite their shared struggles, they persisted. With scores of Oscar nominations, the three of them would go on to become Hollywood legends years later. And a number of victories between them. On stage, Duvall got his first true opportunity. His portrayal of a damaged guy in The Midnight Caller garnered him attention. Horton Foote, a writer, was impressed by the performance and helped him earn even greater roles. Duvall continued to demonstrate his abilities in challenging pieces, such as A View from the Bridge, for which he was honored with an Obie Award in 1965. However, he was first exposed to the world in a quiet yet impactful movie part. He portrayed Boo Radley in To Kill a Mockingbird in 1962. Despite not saying a word in the movie, Duvall made Boo a memorable character. Using only his eyes and body language, he conveyed Boo's warmth and mystery. After seeing him perform, Horton Foote thought he was ideal for the part. Harper Lee, the author, concurred. She just said, "Hey, Boo, get ready," in a telegram. For weeks, Duvall stayed out of the sun to seem pallid and spectral. In order to fit Boo's description in the book, he bleached his hair blonde. He was able to blend into the character thanks to these small decisions. To create tension, the film keeps Boo off-screen until the very end. He ends up protecting Scout and her brother when Scout finally runs into him and whispers, "Hey Boo." It's a quiet, emotional moment. Not the monster he was thought to be by some. He turns into the mockingbird, the story's representation of innocence. Person ought not to suffer damage. Duvall had one sentence in the movie at first, but it was eliminated. Ultimately, he didn't require words. Even without them, his performance was impactful. One of the most memorable parts in cinema history is still Robert Duvall's portrayal of Tom Hagen in the Godfather films. In addition to being the Corleone family's attorney, Hagen was also their confidant and the one who used words rather than force to resolve conflicts. Duvall used silent power to play him. He never really fit in, even though he was a member of the family. Despite being adopted as a child by Vito Corleone, he always felt alienated due to his German-Irish heritage. He was not like Michael or Sonny. He didn't act out of passion or seek power. Hagen was composed, sensible, and forward-thinking. Duvall's performance was particularly noteworthy when The Godfather debuted in theaters in 1972. Hagen was more than a supporting role model. He participated in all significant decisions, frequently mediating conflicts or resolving difficult circumstances. Early on, he experienced one of his most well-known moments. When Hagen visited Hollywood producer Jack Walls, he politely requested that Johnny Fontaine be cast in a movie. The Corleones sent a message after that failed. When Walls awoke, the head of his beloved horse was in bed with him. Although Hagen did not issue the threat, he ensured that the message was received. Hagen's role had become further nuanced by the time The Godfather Part II was released in 1974. Following his survival of an assassination attempt, Michael traveled abroad to investigate its perpetrator. Hagen filled in as Don while he was away. That demonstrated how much the family trusted him, but then things took a turn for the worse. Michael began pushing Hagen away as he became more cruel and frigid. He didn't tell him, which Vito would never have done. Duvall subtly conveyed this change. Hagen's loyalty never wavered, although there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. He remained with the family even if he didn't always agree with Michael. In 1972, Duvall received a nomination for Best Supporting Actor at the Academy Awards. Hagen was quiet and steady, in contrast to other characters like Pacino's Michael or Brando's Vito, who were loud and intense. Although he didn't win, the nomination said a lot. Big speeches weren't necessary for him. He didn't have to shout. The way he spoke was his power. Always remained composed and cautious. He was one of the trilogy's most intriguing characters because of that disparity. Many anticipated Duvall's comeback when The Godfather Part III was announced, but by 1990, the film industry had transformed. To repeat his role, Al Pacino received an offer of $8 million. Duvall received a far lower offer. Although he didn't anticipate equal compensation, he objected when he noticed the significant disparity. He later clarified that he would not have objected if Pacino had earned twice as much. However, he left when the difference was 3 or 4 times. The script had to be altered without Duvall. Hagen was written out of the narrative rather than included. He died off screen, they said. BJ is a new family lawyer. George Hamilton's character Harrison was introduced. However, it was different. Critics and fans realized something was lacking. Francis Ford Coppola, the film's director, acknowledged that Duvall's absence altered the entire plot. The story's original plan was to examine Michael and Hagen's relationship, possibly including a power struggle. However, such notion was abandoned once Hagen left. Many people think that this hurt the film. Duvall never separated himself from the first 2 movies, despite not making a comeback for the third. He told tales from the set throughout the years. Marlon Brando was the subject of one of the most well-known. Since Brando disliked learning lines by heart, he employed cue cards that were tucked away across the set. They occasionally had props behind them. They were occasionally taped on walls. Duvall even had Brando's lines pinned to his chest for one sequence. Brando felt that his performance felt more authentic when he was looking for words. Although some believed it to be lazy, the outcomes were indisputable. He became famous for his portrayal of Don Vito Corleone. For it, he even received an Oscar, but he notoriously declined to accept it. Some of the most memorable characters in movies have been portrayed by Robert Duvall. His characters usually appear genuine, yet they often feel larger than life. He portrayed Lieutenant Colonel Bill Kilgore in Apocalypse Now. A soldier who was as charming as he was intimidating. Francis Ford Coppola's film depicted the Vietnam War in a surreal and eerie manner. Kilgore had nothing to fear. He thought of war as a game. One of the most frequently cited lines in film history is his well-known statement, "I love the smell of napalm in the morning." That statement sums up Kilgore well. He appeared oblivious to the suffering around him and saw devastation as a form of victory. Duvall did not create that character at random. His own father served in the army and was an admiral in the Navy. He was aware of the behavior of actual military guys. When Kilgore instructs his soldiers to surf during a bombing, it's one of his most peculiar moments. He acts as though the war doesn't even exist. Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries exploding as bombs fall is another well-known helicopter scenario. Among the most memorable scenes ever captured on camera. There weren't many sequences with Duvall. However, every moment he was on film was significant. He contributed to the classic status of Apocalypse Now and was awarded a Golden Globe. He portrayed a very different kind of soldier in The Great Santini that same year. He was Lieutenant Colonel Wilbur Bull Meacham this time, a fierce Marine pilot who was nasty at home but proud in the air. Rather than treating his family as a bunch of loved ones, he handled them like a squad. Ben, his son, received the worst of it. Meacham and Ben play basketball in a distressing setting. Meacham is upset when Ben eventually prevails. Rather than feeling proud, he becomes irate. But Duvall did not paint Meacham as a straightforward villain. Even though he didn't know how to express affection, he discovered little instances in which the character demonstrated his concern. Critics took note. They claimed that Meacham was more humanized by Duvall than he was in the first book. The film examined pride, masculinity, and the harm that comes from having too much power. Meacham ultimately makes an effort to mend his relationship with his family, but it is already too late. Duvall's performance earned him an Oscar nomination. A few years later, in Tender Mercies, he delivered one of his most poignant and kind performances. He portrayed a washed-up country musician named Max Sledge who had nearly lost everything due to booze. As he attempted to start again in a small Texas town, the film chronicled his lonely journey. He fell in love and began to transform after meeting a widow and her son. In order to get ready, Duvall traversed Texas and observed how people lived and spoke. He even sang every song by Mac himself. The sequence in which Mac attempts to get back in touch with his daughter is among the most depressing in the movie. She passes away in a vehicle accident just as they are beginning to mend their relationship. It's a tragic incident that demonstrates that certain opportunities never present themselves. The movie was kind and considerate. In subtle, subdued ways, it examined hope and healing. This was one of his most intimate roles, according to Duvall. He performed in a modest note, letting his pauses and small glances speak for themselves. It earned him an Oscar. Despite its lackluster financial performance, the picture gained popularity due to its depth and honesty. A few years later, Duvall gave The Apostle his all. This was no ordinary acting role. He had this dream. He directed the movie, created the screenplay, and covered the majority of the costs himself. He had faith in the story, but no studio wanted to produce it. He portrayed Sonny Dewey, a Pentecostal pastor who motivates others despite struggling with ego and anger. Sonny baptizes himself and attempts to start over in a small Louisiana hamlet after he violently beats a man. Only 7 weeks were needed to shoot the film. There were many of actual churchgoers among the extras. That made the scenes seem more authentic. Not acted out. Sonny was difficult and nice. He uses only patience and preaching to win over a racist construction worker in one of the movie's best scenes. It demonstrated his contradictions as well as his strength. Duvall never allowed the part to appear in a cartoon. He maintained its grounding. His efforts were successful. He received another Oscar nomination. The honesty of the picture was also commended by several commentators. It didn't turn into a big hit. However, many who witnessed its unvarnished and honest depiction of forgiveness and faith were moved. Preaching is one of America's great art forms, according to Duvall. He made that art come to life in The Apostle. Like his lengthy career, Robert Duvall's personal life has been full of ups and downs. Each of his 4 marriages reveals a different aspect of his personality. Barbara Benjamin was the first woman he married. A former dancer on the show hosted by Jackie Gleason. He was filming To Kill a Mockingbird when they first met in the early 1960s. Barbara had 2 kids from a previous relationship, Nancy and Susan, when they were married in 1964. At the time, Duvall was still figuring things out in Hollywood, but movies like The Godfather quickly launched his career. Success came from fame. However, it also brought pressure. In 1975, their marriage came to an end. Although he doesn't discuss those years much, they were a period of personal development. Many years later, in 2019, Barbara died in New York City. Duvall remarried in 1982, 7 years after the first divorce, to actress Gail Youngs. Jim Youngs, Robin Young, and John Savage were among the many actors in her family. On Tender Mercies, the two collaborated. The movie for which Duvall received an Academy Award. Acting gave the impression that they were close, but it wasn't enough to sustain their marriage. By 1986, they were no longer together. Despite his previous declaration that he would never wed an actress, Duvall made an exception for Gail. It couldn't have been easy, but it's difficult to determine if working in the same sector contributed to their breakup. He got married for the third time in this year. Sharon Brophy, his wife, was a professional dancer. Their passion for dancing, particularly Argentine tango, brought them together. At one point, Sharon even taught him tango, but even that unique bond wasn't enough to keep the marriage intact. In 1996, they got divorced. After the divorce, Sharon avoided the limelight, in contrast to Duvall's previous marriages. In the same year, an unforeseen event occurred. Duvall got to know Argentine actress and filmmaker Luciana Pedraza. She invited him to a party even though she didn't first recognize him. They clicked immediately, even though they were 41 years apart in age. The eldest of 5 sisters, Luciana was born in Argentina in 1972 and obtained an MBA before pursuing a career in movies. They eventually collaborated on films like Wild Horses and Assassination Tango. Their romance was heavily influenced by their mutual passion of tango. In 2005, they were married. Since then, they have remained together. In addition to their business in dance, they founded the Robert Duvall Children's Fund, a charity that supports underprivileged families and children, particularly in Argentina. Despite having 4 marriages, Duvall has never had children. He doesn't discuss it much. He joked that he was shooting blanks in one interview. But he didn't say much else. He has never shown regret, whether on purpose or not. As his personal life progressed through these phases, Duvall continued to establish a remarkable profession. In 1989, he played one of his favorite parts in Lonesome Dove. He portrayed retired Texas Ranger Gus McCrae, who was embarking on a final cattle drive with Tommy Lee Jones, his former partner. The miniseries revitalized the Western genre and was a big success. Over 26 million people watched over the course of 4 nights. Gus was made to feel real, amusing, and warm by Duvall. Even more than The Godfather, he subsequently declared it to be his favorite role. Among the several honors Lonesome Dove received were 7 Emmys. James Woods won the Best Actor award, despite Duvall's loss. He was a Golden Globe winner. In the series, Gus's passing was both devastating and impactful. "It's not about dying, Woodrow," he said. "It's about being trapped in front of audiences." Duvall was commended by critics for giving the character genuine nuance. Gus was a complete human being, not just a cowboy. Duvall took on 2 challenging historical parts in the early 1990s. He portrayed Soviet leader Joseph Stalin in an HBO film depicting Stalin's ascent to power in 1992. The picture has an additional depth of authenticity because it was shot in Russia shortly before the fall of the Soviet Union. Duvall prepared for the part by studying hard, speaking with historians and viewing historical video. He referred to Stalin as a fearsome, control-hungry street criminal. He received another Golden Globe for his performance. He portrayed Adolf Eichmann, one of the masterminds behind the Holocaust, in the 1996 film The Man Who Captured Eichmann, another terrifying character. The plot revolved around Eichmann's apprehension in Argentina and the circumstances that led to his trial in Israel. He was portrayed by Duvall as a guy who perpetrated evil with icy detachment rather than as a monster. He received another Emmy nomination for the performance, which was strong and unsettling. Duvall continued to play important roles as he grew older. He played Jerome Fasher in the 1998 film A Civil Action, a shrewd and cunning attorney defending businesses charged with contaminating a town's water supply. He portrayed the character as a man going about his duties rather than as wicked. He was nominated for an Oscar for the part. He portrayed Felix Bush, a recluse guy in 1930s Tennessee who wanted to have his own funeral while still living, in the 2009 film Get Low. The film dealt with secrets, guilt, and atonement. It was regarded by many critics as one of his best performances. Holding back has never been Robert Duvall's style. In addition to his forthright demeanor and powerful performances, he is well known for voicing his opinions, particularly against other members of the film business. He has made it apparent over the years that he has high expectations and is not patient with anything less. Director Stanley Kubrick was among the individuals he was most critical of. Duvall didn't hold back when speaking at a roundtable interview. He referred to Kubrick as an actor's adversary and criticized the acting in some of Kubrick's best-known films. Duvall believed that the acting in movies like The Shining and A Clockwork Orange was awful, despite the fact that they are highly acclaimed. However, he did not criticize the actors. He attributed it to Kubrick's methods. Duvall wondered how a director who required his performers to undergo dozens of takes could possibly determine which actors were better than the others. He believed that such perfectionism undermined effective performance. Duvall wasn't limited to criticizing former filmmakers. He was also critical of contemporary ones. Duvall feigned not to recognize David Fincher when he was discussed at the same roundtable. He mentioned declining a position in Seven after realizing who they were referring to. He said that he had no idea why he had passed on the part, but acknowledged that perhaps, even if only instinctively, Fincher's approach turned him off. He also talked about how difficult it was to work with director Henry Hathaway on True Grit. They did not get along, Duvall stated bluntly. He merely mentioned that Hathaway's forceful directing technique conflicted with his own method acting experience, without going into much further detail. Things became so heated at one point that John Wayne intervened and told Duvall to back out. Or take a blow. The set was obviously anything but tranquil. Duvall gained a reputation for being challenging over his career, but he had a very good justification for it. He claimed that the greatest filmmakers, including Ulu Grossbard, Francis Ford Coppola, and George Lucas, never had an issue with him. Only directors he didn't respect caused him problems. He didn't conceal his annoyance if he didn't think they were good enough. Things occasionally became complicated, even with directors he liked. Despite his admiration for Coppola, he declined The Godfather Part 3 due to a compensation issue. Duvall stated that he would not mind if Al Pacino received twice as much money as he did, but not 3 or 4 times as much. Additionally, he made a joke about how Coppola came to his house to discuss the picture but was more interested in a crab cake dish that Duvall's mother cooked than in whether Duvall would return to the project. Things got off to a great start with Steven Spielberg. The opening scene of Saving Private Ryan was hailed by Duvall as one of the most realistic things he had ever seen in a movie. However, politics later caused their friendship to deteriorate. Duvall was incensed when Spielberg met with Fidel Castro in Cuba. In addition to calling Castro a murderer, he suggested Spielberg acted inappropriately as a diplomat. He even declared that he would never again collaborate with Spielberg's firm, DreamWorks, and that he didn't mind if he didn't. Doing excellent work and not settling for anything less has always been Robert Duvall's philosophy in the film industry. He never feigned to be someone he wasn't, whether or not people appreciated his candor. The flawless image of one of the most revered movie giants has finally been destroyed by Robert Duvall's startling disclosures after 60 years in Hollywood. The startling reality is evident in everything from refusing The Godfather Part 3 due to financial concerns to arguing with Stanley Kubrick and Henry Hathaway. Beneath his outstanding performances was a man who was unwilling to make concessions, even at the expense of millions of dollars. In the industry, he didn't have many friends because of his ruthless honesty, but Duvall didn't care. He once remarked, "The best directors never had a problem with me," suggesting that the others just weren't up to par. He left some of Hollywood's largest franchises and some A-listers refused to collaborate with him again, which can be explained by his unyielding honesty. Whether you like him or not, Robert Duvall's acrimonious conflicts show something uncommon in Hollywood. A celebrity who prioritized his morals before financial gain, even if it meant forming strong rivals in the process. It's still unclear if he was challenging or merely expecting perfection.